All right, so should we go? Should we get started?
Let's do it.
Yeah? All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to East Los Angeles. Welcome to East LA Rep. This is Office Hours by Appointment with Adelina Anthony. So, thank you so much for coming, everybody. We're so excited to have you here, Adelina. And just a little background about first Office Hours, right? We started Office Hours last year, and the idea is to open up our space, right? Open it up. We have a space, and let's open it up so people could come meet here, right? You have an idea, come meet here, right? If you don't have nowhere to meet, come meet other people who are in the arts, who are talking about what you want to talk about. Come rehearse here, right? The space is there, you want to rehearse, right? Rene Millán is trying to get his acting studio running here, so he's trying some workshops here. And come chisme out here, right? The chisme is always good too, so that's the idea. If we open up our space, that's Carla. Hi, Carla.
Hi, Carla.
If we open up the space, people will come and people will get together, and that's good. That's a good thing, right? People connecting and getting together. So then, from that evolved by appointment. Well, once in a while we'll have a special guest, someone we admire, someone we respect, someone we love. Not so much to interview them, but for them to talk about what they're interested in, what's moving them right now, what they're intrigued about right now in their field or in other fields. So that's the idea, right? We had Jorge Huerta was the first one, then we had Luis Alfaro, and now Adelina Anthony. So here we go, right? So I'm going to introduce you now. This is the part where I introduce you. So Adelina Anthony is a critically acclaimed and award-winning queer Chicana lesbian, multi-genre artist, cultural activist, teaching artist, director, and producer.
Ya me cansé.
Now, where I first saw Adelina was, I think, at the Lesbian and Gay Center, right? Doing a Master of Sex and Tortillas. Mastering Sex and Tortillas. And it was awesome because I took a group of elementary school teachers who had no idea what the show was about. And then I was telling her that my sister caught one of the tortillas that flies in the audience. And then later my sisters are like, oh, like tortillas, right? Like, oh, my grandma makes tortillas too. I'm like, wow, my grandma's a different kind of tortillera. You know, but it was just awesome, right? That's where I first saw you, and I was blown away by your solo work. It's amazing. So now you're making this transition into film, right? And she started this production with Marisa Becerra called Aderisa Production, where you're working on your first feature film, Bruising for Vessels, right? And this is also very cool. You're a part of this Teatro QPOC. Can anyone guess?
Queer people of color.
Queer people of color. And it's a space you have for emerging artists and writers, right? So you could definitely talk to us more about that. So, Adelina Anthony, ladies and gentlemen.
All right.
Very cool. So, any opening thoughts, Adelina? Or?
I do. I want to actually start off by saying how honored I am by the invitation to say that I'm one of the beneficiaries of the East LA Rep space because our short film, Forgiving Heart, could not have been rehearsed properly without the generosity of East LA Rep. I live in Ventura actually, so I'm not in LA. I'm not in LA every day, but I come in for work, and my actors were based here, and so I was like, wow, so I'm not going to ask them to go drive over there for rehearsal, and so I had reached out to Jesus and East LA Rep. I was like, because I knew they had a space. I was like, is there any way we can rehearse here? And just open corazones, and they're like, yeah, let's make it work time. So I really feel like, you know, you'll see it on the end titles when we get to premiere the film, that they're like our community supporters.
We can send you our new logo.
Yeah, send it to me, seriously, before we get on there. So I just have to say how valuable it is to have artists who are working so consciously, and I feel that that was one of the reasons that I wanted to touch upon these themes of health for artists and our communities, how one works with consciousness, how one works with the specificity of our vidas, and what rich fodder it is for us, not only in terms of our artistry and that kind of work, but in terms of the kind of necessary plática and dialogue that needs to continue to happen amongst all of our different comunidades. And I find that as a Chicana, it's so inspiring to really to be connected in in whatever way, form, or fashion, because having done workshops, you know, or having been supporters of your work, to a group of artists who are working with that kind of sentido en corazón. Because I feel at the end of the day, there are all kinds of artists, and there are people that have deeply influenced me and that I admire. And I am finding more and more as I get older that it's not just about really good art making, but I'm really touched by people who are also trying to evolve in ways where you see that the art has started to influence and shape their lives. And I think that if we ask ourselves what brought you to the art, we all might have different reasons, different caminos that have brought us here, but there's a reason that arte sustains us individually and then in a communal sense. So I'm really happy to be here and want to make this a plática.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
yeah, so I'm like, don't be shy. Si tienen preguntas, or I know there are a lot of solo artists here and directors and writers and the theater community. Like, you know, that's just awesome because we, I mean, you can perform for yourself in the house, but I can tell you that after a while the plantas are not the most warmer receiving crowd.
The return of the standing ovations.
Exactly. I was like, that's all they can do, my plantitas. Hey.
Well, I'm glad you said that about jumping in, because yes, that's the idea, to help us shape this conversation. Adelina definitely has things she wanted to touch on, but the idea is, let's have this talk, right? And starting from there, what you just said, like, so how did art get in your life? Or how did you first get there? And then we'll go to mentorship, because
That's
I
connected.
want to talk about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I try to be very transparent that, you know, I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, on the south side and west side comunidades, so the barrios, and with a lot of pobreza in my life. And if you always believe in statistics, I should probably be single, pregnant with my own set of kids, y quien sabe qué más, because the circumstances weren't necessarily the best, but I think there are circumstances that a lot of us experience as raza because of the historical conditions that have created communities without access. And so growing up as a young child, I always talk very honestly that theater was not an experience for my familia. We didn't, you know, I'm from San Antonio, and I didn't learn about the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center until I left, became an artist in my own right, and then people were like, you're from San Antonio, don't you know about this space? And I was like, no, I didn't, because that wasn't my experience as a young child.
What is it?
My experience is actually what I call the
Guadalupe Center?
Oh, I'm sorry, the Guadalupe Cultural Center is one of the oldest cultural centers that we have in San Antonio. It's over 30 years old, and it started up back in the day. And it's an amazing space where they do all kinds of cultural arts programming, Chicano arts, Latino arts, and it's really on the world map for, it's where they hold the Cine Festival. They've been connected to Conjunto, Sandra Cisneros did a lot of work with them early on. So a lot of major Chicano Latino artists have gone through the Guadalupe, and significantly, it's in the west side of San Antonio, which is, you know, what historically has been our barrio, and so it was there from the beginning, you know, and so now it has a huge name, but it grew, you know, from something small with a lot of vision and commitment, which always reminds me of, like you were talking earlier about East LA Rep and how it keeps evolving and growing, and there's always something to be said for the individuals who start up an organization in the beginning and stay with it, you know, and for those individuals who come into an organization and give of themselves for whatever time, because really organizations are their blood, they're real bodies that come together and make things happen. So my connection to art came through what I call the Mexicano living room drama, in that very much as we know, our familias, our culturas, we have a rich legacy of oral history. We may not always recognize it, and especially as we're growing up in it, but as a child and in reflection, I would say one of the best comedians that I ever experienced in my life was my own mother. And through my family, I learned the art of mimicry, mockery, and that really good Mexican humor where you just go at something until you're painfully laughing because it's so, it's such a release to reenact something that maybe a few weeks prior was a trauma and casi te moriste, pero girl, you should have seen your cara. And everyone's reenacting it, and my mother was the best at making us laugh, and she had this uncanny gift for being able to laugh at herself and our situation in a way that made us all collectively have a cathartic experience about, you know, something that any therapist today would be like, well, that's traumatizing. I was like, are we healed in this way? So, which is why humor has always been important to my work. That being said, I owe my career to a 4th grade Chicano teacher in elementary, Jose Gonzalez, who instead of punishing me or putting me in detention for being class clown, pulled me aside one day and literally said, Mija, he goes, I think you could be an actress. I was like, is this so? And so he's like, would you, he goes, if we do a play, he goes, would you be in it? And I was like, sure, you know, let's talk. He goes, no, he goes, you know, and I was writing creatively in class, and he completely encouraged it. And so we put on a play. I'm glad Facebook did not exist back then. It's probably the worst acting I've ever done in my life. It was very melodramatic because that's what the play called for. The title was like The 3 Silly Noodles. So yeah, it was 4th grade, right? It's like, I can't even tell you, but the basic premise is like this young ingenue character, her sweetheart's gonna come visit, and her parents send her down to the wine cellar and tell her, oh, go bring us some, you know, vino for your sweetheart. And she goes down to the cellar, she sees an axe and starts to imagine, oh, what if the axe fell? And, you know, just imagines the worst and starts crying. And so one by one, they all go down. They're like, the mother goes down. She's like, why haven't you come up? And she tells her, look at this axe, and wouldn't it be sad if this is this? And then they're both crying. So then the father comes down. And he's like, why are you two crying? Boom. So she's constantly like bringing them into her sad story. And finally the sweetheart, who's been like waiting, the suitor, he comes down. And at least this is a version we performed. And he's like, you guys are so silly. And like, it's kind of tragic though. He like dumps her, I guess, and leaves her there with the family because they're so silly about worrying about the axe. And I remember this story and this performance because it's the first stage performance. And this is true, and what I always hold on to when I work with my students is that our life experiences provide us with such rich emotional colors to work with that we're not even aware that it's there or how it can be transmuted into art sometimes. But in this play, we'd be rehearsing. He's like, okay, so this is a part where you cry. So he wasn't a director, right? Because most directors, Alejandro and Silvio, go like, well, you don't tell an actor, cry, i.e. cry. So you guide them and hope that they emote properly with the right verbs. So, but he's like, you know, he wasn't a director, he was just a good Chicano teacher who was like, well, let's put on a play. And so he was like, we cry. And so I was a 9-year-old, I was like, okay, boom. I would cry on the spot all the time. And I thought nothing of it. And then, you know, we ended up winning like I think our little school district contest for plays or something, and it became like this little thing, like, wow, we did a play. And then afterwards he's like, yeah, I want to. Ooh.
That's awesome.
And he's like, how do you do that? He goes, I've been wanting, he goes, I've been watching you for weeks now. And I was like, how do I do what? He goes, te digo, cry, and you cry. I said, because you told me to. and it's the child's innocence that I didn't know not to, or that it was supposed to be difficult, you know, to cry on cue. And at that time, you know, it wasn't something that I necessarily, you know, cared with me. It was years later that I reflected when I started working with actors and training, in particular youth of color, and how we access our emotions in a very different way than when I worked in university settings with, you know, white folk or non-colored folk. I don't know what to call it. You know what I mean. So, but it's a different experience because I remember working in class with some very privileged youth and accessing emotion. We had to come at it a totally different way. And what I started to learn as a young teacher of theater and working with our bodies and our stories is that we have these cultural assets that haven't necessarily been viewed as assets always, because our life experiences and sometimes these traumas that we do go through provide us with the landscape that allow us to travel imaginatively, figuratively, and for any actor in a very experiential way, because I feel that the best of acting is the experience of it and not necessarily the superficial performance of it. So it's all connected to then that conversation of health for our communities too, especially when I work with actors, because if trauma stays in our bodies and it's untouched, it becomes toxic. And I feel that a lot of times when I've been working with young actors in particular, and by young it's not even necessarily age, because I've worked with people coming into acting later in their life, but they're new to the experience of acting. The process of opening up is very easy for us a lot of times, and we can tap those emotions. What I have found over the years is that very few people are talking about how we properly close and how we properly and that's why I want to talk to you about your process after that workshop, that we create ritual for ourselves individually so that we're not a hot mess in the community, right? Because the other part of the conversation is that if we're artists in the community, and we see it around today, and we've seen it for generations, there's a way in which destruction is all around us, and that eagerness to sometimes model ourselves under what we assume necessitates great art making. Oh, the suffering artist. Oh, the artist who we're like, yeah, she's cray-cray, but that work's phenomenal. Or he's a jerk, and I would never work with him. But and we're constantly making excuses. And I feel that the question that we have to hold to each other in the most loving way, because if we're looking at what an artist can bring to the stage as an offering, saying, here's my traumas, fictionalized or borrowed and reconstituted, and we see reflection in that, right? Which is usually why we're drawn to certain artistry, certain work, because there's a way that you're like, oh, that's speaking to me. Or maybe you're learning something new, but it still affects you in a deep way. Then my question to us is that where is the reciprocity in mutual responsibility for each other? Because if we're going to love each other as artists, then it also means that care of the self off the stage, because it's wonderful to see complexity and divahood and conflict on the stage. That's where it belongs, right? It really, really belongs there. That I thrill in the fact that I can do things and say things, and you know this, that come out of my mouth, and these characters that are hyper sexualized, hyper political, they're just hyperbolic. But it's not how I want to carry myself in life.
But how did that happen for you though? Like all these things from the past, like how does the distance happen? Like through the art making itself, or I don't, you know what I mean? Like how do you get there so you're not a hot mess on the stage and then
afterwards? Right?
Yeah.
It's a process, no? Because I feel like I wish I had mentorship much early on in my career. Like someone who literally could see me and say, you tienes talento, but this, and this is going to trip you up. I didn't necessarily have that kind of mentorship early on, and so for my own self, I know that I made a lot of mistakes. Maybe I was that hot mess where it wasn't, the life and the stage, get blurred, and so you continue to play out these cycles of destruction. I think the other thing for the artist is that very honest conversation with the self about ego, why we're even doing the work, and then what is your relationship to the work and the audience, and what is your relationship to your spiritual practice of the work. And so for me, what I've always pointed to in the last few years, it took my mother dying, right? It took a very intense death to literally stop me. And not that I wasn't making art in good ways before then, and that I hadn't started to grow up a little, because I think that fortunately I caught on in my mid-20s that I was like, you know what, there is a difference between spending time with the craft versus spending time partying and getting known as the artist in the community who maybe does good work, but you're also getting known for what you're doing in your circles, and we all know this. We all know people who started off and you're like, wow, that cray in her 20s, or him in his 30s, and partly I speak to it because if we're gonna continue, and we have to, right? We're in this world of comunidad. It's always that loving process of like watching someone, loving them enough, and fostering relationship, and pulling them aside. And so eventually I did get that. I did get people who were, salud, a little bit older and loving. Because you also have to hear it from people that you love and that respect and you admire, and that are also, they're also walking that path. That you see that they truly are practicing, what they're talking about. And it's not, here's the thing, it's not to say that one walks like a saint in this vida, because I know I'm not a santita, I make my mistakes, but one would hope that art has taught us how to reflect. And that at least with reflection, we begin to incorporate what the art that we're trying to put out in the world is doing to us, it's change. And so it goes back to what kind of artist you are, right? So all of us are making art for different reasons, and so I think those are questions and decisions that you make along for yourself. I know that when my mother passed, and it was such a deep rupture, that the beauty in all of that grief was the absolute silence around death. I mean, and we've all seen grief on people, and it's like the Buddhists talk about, you enter this club of mourners and grievers in a way that until you've experienced that kind of death, it is like a birth in this life. And it is painful, but it is another opportunity for rebirth. And in many ways, I cite my mother's passing as her giving birth to me again, because as painful as it was, and it was painful because I hadn't made the return yet as a Chicana daughter, because of those same traumas, right? Lo que no se habla en nuestras familias. My family has had to deal with domestic violence, with alcoholism, with pedophilia, with abuse. And we grow up with it, and at some point we also, because you have to, you create a little armor, and you're like, oh, I dealt with it. Oh, I'm good. Oh, you too? You got molested? Oh, yeah. Who has it? Right? And you develop this kind of like, I'm good. But we're not. And death reminds us that going into those wounds and opening up that scar tissue to really excise what has been poisoned in us, creates that opportunity for really then going like, okay, this is what's still in me. How do I transform it and make it something that is not silence and shame, that is not requiring me to keep it inside? Because that's also the truth of having been, any of us who have survived or have been victimized. The intention of the victimizer was for you or me to carry that hurt. That's part of what they inflict. What we get to do as artists, and what we get to do as community members together, is to take that, transform it, and give it back in something that is something shaped aesthetically, politically, culturally, spiritually. When we do that, that's what is radical art making and transformative. Because all of a sudden, going back to that artist ego, right? When we're young and we assume, ooh, the limelight, oh, they clapped for me, oh, you know, that addictiveness to like, they love me, yay, this is good. That is set aside. And what it comes back to is then being an artist where the ego is put away from the minute you start your artistic process, because ego will screw up the writing, ego will screw up the performance, and you don't get attached to the this. What you get attached to is those very meaningful one-on-one conversations that you'll experience with an audience member here, where they're like, "The show saved my life." Because I've heard those words over and over again, and I don't take them lightly. I say that as a mujer, I say that as a Chicana, I say that as a queer person. When so much is already trying to destroy us, when someone says, "This show saved my life," that to me is blessing and responsibility. And it means that then as an artist, I have to let the art change me too. Because if I'm trying to put this out in the world, but it's not a reflection of who I'm becoming in my own process, you all know that. We know when we get fakery, you know, when one gets a sense of like, that's good, but there's not truth there, you know. And so if we're all trying to get to our truths, they're complex, they're difficult, you know. Anything I put on the stage has, I hope, a combination of everything that is pitiful and grand in us, in myself, everything that is frightening, and the courage that it takes for us to be artists in this world, in this society, in this city, in this day. Because looking at this room, we've made gains as comunidades, but we are still we're not anywhere near where we should be if we were living in a society that truly wanted our stories, our bodies, and our voices on stages and on film. I mean, and that's just the truth. If we're looking at, and you know, who's leading what and who's on top. So that's mainstream, so we want to call it that. But we can't get stuck on that, because the other thing that I always point to is, but look who's in the room. You know, that we have each other, and that there are audiences for each of our work, right? So I guess that was a long, and verbose answer to the faith and process. You know, it doesn't happen overnight, and it comes with a lot of, for lack of a better phrase, a lot of chingazos from life, you know? But when you're down, it's not just, oh, I got hurt, I'm mad. It's like, I got hurt, I'm mad, what's going on? You know, when you touch the ground, when life has put you on the ground, that's your opportunity to say, I'm grounded. I'm grounded in a lot of pain. Pain is growth. Let's reflect, and how you come back up is what speaks to your own personal journey, right?
Yeah. Wow. So then, like, well, we heard some of that, right, when with the class we took with Luis, right? That, and what you say is so great, yeah, that idea of that pain. Well, I think he said it once, like, suffering is messed up, but it will make some great art.
Yeah.
But you have to have that, what you're talking about, that sense of that distance of resolving it, and then it becomes kind of like a gift, right? Like you said,
Absolutely.
like a gift.
Well, because it's also important to recognize that pain doesn't necessarily translate into art. You can do therapy with art, right? And we have to be conscious as artists what that difference is. So one of the things when I'm working with actors or writers in particular is that if the acting or the writing is so painful that they're breaking down in the moment, I'm applauding that brother or sister, say, good, go there. It's not art yet.
Yeah.
Because the technique that one uses, right, of how you turn on and off, you know, the whole cry now. You know, it is technique, and so it's the technique that really speaks to how you have made artistry of your life experience, right? But you need that life experience to, I feel, to have a sense of the human experience. Like, again, if one is living with one's ego and it's all about the self, it's very limiting. I mean, we know so little. But to be able as an artist to go into the broader human experience by using the self as the guidepost, then we get to expand our notions of our humanity. And for me, I feel blessed that I started off as an actor because it required me to step into roles that I had obviously, you know, even some of the classic roles or the contemporary roles, I was like, well, I've never done this, but wow, for 6 weeks, I'm immersed in this persona, and what does it mean that, you know, you want to kill so-and-so, or what does it mean that you would do this? And any actor will tell you that the best work comes from loving your character. It matters not how horrific they are, you have to love that character. And then taking that into your other genres and understanding that the reason we come to love that character, we may not want them as real friends in life, is that it starts to teach us how to understand the human condition in a way that has a true empathetic bone structure to it, you know. And again, that doesn't mean that we're saints or we're the Dalai Lama walking around not getting affected. Like, you get triggered, you get affected, but I think that as you work on this and you start, for me a lot of times when I get triggered, I'm like, ooh, this irked me, or this aggravated me, or this made me feel very passionate. One, it's a reminder that it's something that I care about. It's something that's probably very true to my experience. And then the very next question I have for myself is, okay, what do I do next? So in my teens and in my early 20s, my mouth was usually the first thing running off, right? La Xicana, blah, 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 blah. And as I've aged, thankfully, I'm more reticent with that, because I know, oh, you know, we know what the Chicana tongue can do out there. It can slash, and that's not the best technique. But what does it mean to kind of recognize, okay, this is me. This isn't about so-and-so, this is me. And if I'm an artist, let me give it to a character. Let me give it to a story. And once I start giving it to story and character, I start going into it in a way that I do in those early acting roles, right? Because it becomes something of me and not of me. So you're able to use that objectivity to kind of go in and out. And I think these are beautiful gifts to have as artists and to share and to really understand what it can do for us in a broader sense when we're looking at the health of us individually and within the community. Because our community is only as strong as the health of our individuals. Is that?
Yeah.
I mean, you'd be like, yeah, whatever, let's go party. Go get me some more wine. No.
So now that you you've been at it for a while, right? So now how do you feel like the mentorship happens? Like you said, you wish it would have came earlier for you, right? So how does that work for you now that you're a mentor now, right? I mean, but how does that work for you? Like, is it something where you see someone's work and you say, wow, like that person reminds me of me, or is everyone a right fit for a mentor? Does it have to fit somehow? Like, how does that work?
I wanted to talk about this because, you know, I've been blessed and I've had like really solid mentors in different capacities. So one is understanding that when we're looking for mentorship, it's different from going, oh, so-and-so has been my teacher. Because a teacher will keep things confined to a classroom. And there's usually boundaries within that. Like if you think about your elementary experience, middle school and high school, I didn't know my teachers had lives. I just assumed we were their life. I never imagined they had a life. And now some of my best friends are teachers, and I was like, oh my God, my teachers must have been crazy too. Right? And so there are teachers that I think we seek out sometimes. We're like, oh, so-and-so is gonna offer this, and I'm gonna go learn these techniques. Mentorship is something that is, I think in the best case scenarios, it happens organically, right? And we do go and we seek out people that we're like, oh my God, this person is writing and saying things that this is what I want to be saying, this is what I want to be doing. I mean, I know that that was true for me in particular when I landed upon the works of Cherie, right? That as a Chicana lesbian, almost 20 years ago, I read her works. And she's it, you know, she is our Chicana lesbian playwright. We haven't had someone of her stature come up. And the body of work, I mean, that's the other thing, is that you want to look at someone who is, the breadth of their work is also speaking to their own evolution, and that they're continuing to work as an artist. Because to get mentored by a one-hit wonder doesn't necessarily, you know, do anything for you except like, oh, so-and-so, oops. Come in. Goodbye. That was it. That's how asustado.
Should we just clap for them?
I know.
Mr. Rogers, no rules at the door.
Gus is who's.
The back door. Oh, here they are. And so I've had friends ask me, they're like, oh, well, how do you approach a mentor? What's the best way? Because a lot of times what happens is that we are in such need of mentorship in our communities. And we usually find that people that we want to get mentorship from are being pulled at 100 different ways. I know for a fact that by the time I really started working with Cherie and was getting formally mentored by her, it had been years before where I was like producing her plays. I had done, you know, some work in Texas. Maybe we had talked on the phone once. So it had been years before I even met her in person. And then I met her in person. And so the interesting thing about mentorships is that they should be a two-way street. So a lot of times I've had folks tell me, oh, I went to so-and-so, but you know, they were too busy, they didn't respond. I was like, yeah, they are busy. And a lot of times they're usually mentoring someone already. And it has to be something organic in a way that the mentor sees, wow, if I'm going to invest time in this person, this young artist, it's because they really see that something's going to come out of it too, right? So a lot of times the young artists that I work with, they're not necessarily ready to be mentored yet. And I know it because I'll ask them, I was like, well, what's your writing schedule like? Or what's your own kind of discipline, you know? And so a lot of times if you're looking for mentorship, but you haven't done the work that is showing, no, I'm a serious artist, people can read that. And they may see your talent, they're like, okay, so-and-so's got something, but they're not ready yet. You know, and I remember in my early 20s, you know, meeting folks and I do appreciate that when someone was like, oh, tienes talento, but you're not ready yet. And I remember going like 22, right? Ooh, imagine 22 when we think we know everything. I was like, what? What? Chicana, what? But it stuck with me in a good way. And I respect that, you know, that someone, and so it also becomes this way, again, put that ego away, that if someone you respect really, you know, looks at your work or sees something and says, yeah, this is something here, but you need to work on this. And I'll see it sometimes. Like I tend to wait if someone, and even if someone asks me, hey, can I have feedback? If I don't know them, sometimes I'm a little hesitant to give feedback because I've given feedback and then that artist has gotten hella pissed. Hey, can you believe she told me this and da-da-da-da? And it happens, right? And we laugh about it, but I don't take it personal. I'm like, okay, that's a young artist, still very...
That's me.
Yeah, we're very protected and like, oh, he's like, that's me. But it's not the way it is now that...
When you were 22.
When I was 22, yeah, that was me too. He's like, not me. See how you don't want to take the critique? No.
I'm not ready.
I'm not ready. So what one realizes is that finding mentors is a process, and it's one that should be done respectfully. That if you really, really want to work with someone, then the other thing is to go, like I always say, I'll say, usually folks are offering some kind of workshop. Go get in a serious workshop with someone, because you may find that someone who you respect as an artist isn't necessarily the best teacher, right? Or the best mentor, because teaching is a skill. And a lot of times, I know that I personally get irate when I see artists who start doing the teaching grants. And I know they're not good teachers. They're like, I'm broke, I need to apply for this teaching grant. You know, and it's a disservice. It's a disservice to those students, because I've had those experiences. I'm like, whoa, so-and-so is just faking it. And you can tell when you're being taught by someone who's amazing. So, you know, to date, the most influential mentorship has been that with Shetty. And she's an amazing teacher. Amazing. I feel that my teaching skills evolved and went to these other levels that would not have happened without her. But she's also equally extremely rigorous as an artist. And so when you meet someone who's extremely rigorous, that's no joke, right? Don't come and waste their time, you know? Don't come and play at it. If one is still playing at it, get peer groups where you can really motivate each other. I did that in my 20s, where I was like, I think I want to be a writer. Okay, when you think you're going to be something, you can spend a lot of time in that stage, right? And maybe you'll like write some cositas. This is me at 21. I think I want to do this. Yeah, I'm going to do this. And so, fortunately, you get those groups with other people who think they want to be writers también. You know? And maybe out of a group of 6, one serious writer will evolve, you know, or someone will get their act together and realize, oh, okay, I got it really good. But what's beautiful about those groups is that they really provide peer support. And you start to see, talk about reflection, right? I love my comadres from my early 20s, because I started to see, I was like, you know, as maybe 2 years later, I was a serious writer. And I'd see the emerging writers, I was like, and I go, oh, that was me. Even 2 years makes a difference when you decide, no more joking. Like, this is my life, you know, this is my passion, this is my work, you know. So there's I think that there's no real road to mentorship except that one becomes persistent in doing their research and is persistent in a polite way too, right? Because I've had experiences, myself and also with friends who are also mentors and all that, and sometimes they've been like bogged down. It's just, you never know what's going on in a person's life, you know, and how much they're holding down. And I think that if you make yourself present enough, you will get noticed, right? Or your work will get noticed, and it begins to evolve in a beautiful way. The thing about mentorship is that, again, there are all kinds of mentorships. Maybe the mentorship you need is very pragmatic and you just want professional advice about, you know what, how do I go about doing this and this? Maybe you need a mentorship that's going to give you access to networking communities. Maybe you need a mentorship that is specific to your genre. Like I want to get, you know, mentorship in the writing, I want to get acting or directing. The more nuanced and difficult mentorships, and they're the ones that probably change your life forever, are the ones when someone literally invites you into their life. Yeah. and they become mentors because you have access to how they live and make their art on the day-to-day. And when you see that experience, right, the life of a working artist, it gives you a whole new perspective. So when I started to see my mentor and the day-to-day load that she was managing or that she was being asked to carry, then I understood the delay in emails or the very kind of decided, this is what I can do, how we overextend ourselves sometimes. And in many ways, you find that mentees become kind of protectors of their mentors and loyalists because you're seeing it, what it takes to make art the way we want to make it, right? And to talk about trying to make art on our own sovereign terms. Salud. Salud, Sylvia. It's the Downy folks.
I know.
As she blushes. No, so as I've been telling some of the younger folks that I met, I was like, it'll happen, and sometimes it'll happen through a program. I'm really lucky that I'm doing the Project Involved Fellowship this year, and they connect you with mentors, and again, it's a very organic experience, and you figure out energetically if someone matches with you.
What's Project Involved?
Project Involved is part of Film Independent, and I would recommend it to anyone who wants to make indie films, and they're connected with the LA Film Festival. So I was accepted as a fellow for 2012-2013, which is connected to this transition of theater and film. I should say going back into film. And so I'm part of Project Involved this year, and it's been a really great experience. They connect you with workshops. One of the tracks is connecting you with a mentor in the industry. And so they were very forthright about, hey, sometimes these mentorships, we connect you with someone and it's very, as we would say, ay, que frío, or, other people have had like, oh, I love my mentor, I still am in touch with them. And that's just because it comes down to, are you a good match, for that person? And one should never approach a mentor thinking like, really, I'm the one you need to work with, because yes, that may be true, but maybe they're working with like 5 of you right now, and to say that kind of mentorship where someone really brings you into their life, that's takes a certain kind of honoring too. No matter what happens with your mentor relationships, I was having a talk with my really good friend Daniel, and we were talking about this because he's been mentored as well, and he's also a mentor now, right? Because mentoring teaches you how to become a mentor one day too, and our mentors are humans, and at the end of the day, what we look for in people is what we want to see in ourselves. So I feel that I've taken the best of my mentorships and have gone like, okay, so-and-so taught me this, so-and-so taught me this, and this is what I want to give back and how I want to give it back, and so it becomes a very kind of intimate relationship that one can build with another artist, and I think it's exciting, and I think that it's something that all of us should aspire to. Like, what does it take to become someone who can be a great mentor to the next generation, right? To the next group or artist around you. And sometimes it'll last for years. Maybe it'll be a summer. I mean, it's not the time-wise, it's just like, what do you get out of it? And what do you give back? That's the other thing. When you do find a mentor, find ways to be generous as well. You'll see your mentors carrying 20 things, be like, hey, I can carry that. I can do this. Because partly if you're getting mentored, they see something in you, right? The tienes capaz, you can do this and that. And so run with things. And that's how you grow, and they're taking chances on you. And you'll find that at some point the conversations go from, ooh la la, to, oh, I've been mentored so well that we're having like really good peer-to-peer conversations, and that's a beautiful thing, And when one mentors, it's also the other thing that's the component that sometimes is missing in our conversation is knowing when the mentee's done, and that's just true. Because I've had people that I've mentored, and I'm like, go, like you're hot, you're like
Grasshopper.
Don't go to Oaxaca, allá te van a comer. So, but yeah, and then they come back, and then you're working as artists in a collaborative level. I mean, it's beautiful because we're always learning. Like I have mentors now, and.
But is it difficult, or has it been difficult for you to identify? Oh, I'm his sister. Hi.
From Downey.
Cindy Marie Jenkins said, say their name. I mean, has it been difficult for you to acknowledge your mentee? He's all grown up. She's all grown up now. I mean, I know that that's sometimes a little difficult, where we may never, because your trajectory may be further ahead, we may never become like this. That at some point, like, you know, it may be difficult for the mentor to see. Or like, you know, your mother, oh, mi hijo's all grown up now. Or,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, has that been difficult, and how do you?
I think that because I've been on the other side, where I, in my 20s in particular, I had the experience where I was like, oh, like as a mentee, you have to know when you're like running in circles with your mentor, and you're like, okay, maybe this has been exhausted. And so I've been on the other side when someone's kind of not necessarily been ready to let me go as a mentee. And I'm grateful for that blessing, because being where I am now, it's practicing the non-attachment. Like, I have learned, and I hope I continue to practice this in the best way possible, that when I have mentored someone, again, going to how we work consciously, it has been consciously going in saying, I'm going to open myself up to this person, give my time and energy and resources, and I have no attachment. That's been the saving grace thus far. And then getting to a place of just recognizing, even if my trajectory is, you know, over here and this person's here, wherever someone is, a really good mentor is gonna applaud and recognize, you know what, you may not be here yet, but where you are, you've surpassed where I could have been in my 20s, where I could have been at this stage. Look at where you're going. So it comes from practicing generosity and understanding that we don't control people, and that just because you mentor someone doesn't mean that you've made them, right? We can influence each other, but the beautiful thing about mentees or people who want to work with you is they come with something. They come with something. And so if you're going to be the best of mentors, it's recognizing like so-and-so had this in them. You know, maybe you help shape, maybe you help guide, but I think it's dangerous when, from a mentor perspective, you're like, oh, I made so-and-so. They didn't, you know, that language terrifies me, so I don't use it, and by not using the language, it's not part of my thought process. And it becomes a way to both honor each individual and what they bring and where they are, and that really that creates them for the long haul, this way in which you can really see the person and really understand that they also influence me as artists, right? That someone younger who maybe their acting chops aren't all there, but they bring something else. That's energizing to me. So that two-way street is critical, because power dynamics can always get, I think, tricky. And I know that I was raised well. Like, I was raised to respect my elders. I was raised to recognize when someone has, you know, you give props when people have worked really hard, and you can see it. And for me, as an artist, I always say, I could not be here today were it not for the mujeres and the artists and the men of color who came before me and made this ground possible. You know, and so each generation gets to stand on the ground and push into it, you know, expand it and make room for more people. But if we don't have a generosity of spirit with our working with each other, then we begin to betray each other, I think, in very deep ways, because we come back to this control. And, you know, there's no need to control or to put your stamp on someone. Like, and you feel it, you know? So I think when you feel something like that, run.
Or like the ego, you said.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
revisit.
Yeah, like what do you do within a comunidad? You see that happening, and how do you deal with it as an artist that's coming into that comunidad, seeing other people maybe being destructive to each other?
Well, I think it depends on what the context of that community is. If I'm asked directly about things, I tend to be very transparent and honest and say, you know what, this is my feeling, this is what I'm seeing. If I know someone in those circles, I usually go to that person, and if I have a relationship, I tend to have a lot of private conversations with individuals. If I don't know any of those individuals, because that's the other thing, I never come into a community and go like, oh, they're gonna respect me, they're gonna hear me. Then that for me is my job as an artist to figure out the complexity, and it usually ends up on the stage. And then I let it reflect back. And my audiences aren't dumb. You know, they're like, oh, girl, that's you. You know, but I say that in the truest sense, because then for me it's that responsibility of the personal and the political, right? Which is really, it's hard to navigate. It's hard to navigate because we're all sensitive. You know, we all get our feelings hurt, and we all get like, oh, so-and-so doesn't like me as much, or she said this. And so, I try to go back to, what can I do with this? And the best thing I can do with it is make art from it, right? Because then it also, I'm part of it, and I'm also separate from it. I'm able to see more nuance and see things that then generate dialogue and conversation, hopefully between people who do know each other, right? So those are usually my methods of strategy now. They don't always work, but.
Adelina, I want to touch on something that you...
You're gonna touch me, kid?
No.
You're alive.
We have
Wait, hi to the lesbians cuddling in bed.
One of the things Adelina wanted to talk about was this idea of honoring work with specificity.
Yeah.
And I'm here to talk about that because we have a lot of people here on kind of different places on that road to doing solo performance work. And you can make a career, you said, in a career as a Xicana-jota-feminist-qpoc. But I think I know what you mean by don't be afraid to be specific, but talk about that.
Okay, what do you think I think I know?
I think you're saying like what you said earlier about opening those wounds, and kind of like the more you go kind of personal and deeper about you, in a reverse way, the more the audience will open up and connect with what you're saying.
Exactly.
Right, pass?
Yes, A plus. I need the gold star.
He answered his own question.
But I think as we talk about, right, different trying to do this solo performance stuff, it's like you're trying to connect to the most people, but maybe that's not the way, right? Like, I don't know, talk about that.
Well, it's interesting because I was talking to a friend yesterday about this, and the image that I've been using for the last few years is the bullseye. And I always refer to the bullseye and say, I made a conscious choice, mid-20s, to craft a career as a out lesbian Chicana solo performer. And it was both pragmatic and political. And in doing that, I made a conscious choice to write work that put front and center queer Chicana characters, and that was going to be my ideal audience. Not my only audience, but that's my ideal audience, and that's who I was going to talk to. Because coming up in young, you know, when I thought I was going to be a writer and do writing workshops, they always say, who's your audience, and who are you thinking about? And that was an important shift in my career, in my artist trajectory, because at least in my head, when I was generating the work, I was talking to other jotas. I was like, oh yeah, this would be funny to us. Oh yes, this would be culturally specific. And in doing that, it means that when people come to my show, I always say that if you're a progressive, queer Chicana with an X, you're right there, bullseye. You're laughing at the jokes on sexuality, the jokes on feminism, the jokes on indigeneity, you're just going, ha 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 ha. You think I'm the funniest person in the world. Now, right outside of that, right, the next little circle might just be all the feminist Chicana mujeres, and they're not even joteria, they're just like ally, girlfriend. Ándale, tortilla. And they're getting most of the jokes by the next in association. And then the circle expands, and it's just Chicanidad, because my work is always Spanglish, and that's just a choice that it wasn't even a choice, it's my DNA. Like, people go, what was your first language? English or Spanish? Spanglish. And it's true. So it's how I love to cultivate character and begin with language, both politically and for its poetic aspecto. So then there's the Chicanidad, the Spanglish jokes, and just down guys, allies, who are laughing and having a good time. And then the circle expands, and maybe it's other queer people. They're not getting the Spanish, but it's like my black lesbian sisters or Asian, and they're laughing this. And then the circle expands, and now it's just folks who walked into the wrong theater. They're like haha laughing, and in particular, when I'm at the university circuit, way out. The dart didn't land in the circle. He's like right outside, but he's still sitting out there. Is that long, little, skinny, white Republican guy who is required to come to the show for his Chicana feminist class. It's one person, class that he has to take throughout college. And he'll find himself either very tortured for an hour and a half,
or turned on.
And he will go, wow, like either I need to figure this out and consciously, right? So I don't allow for passive audience, and that's one of the running foundations of Chicano theater, right? How we interact with audience. He will either figure out over his years how to gain consciousness so he lands somewhere close to that middle circle. I don't think he'll ever be right in the middle, but he'll be close enough to be like hanging with, the allies and saying like, I've seen her throw tortillas before. And so what happens is that by being that specific and having no apologies around it, because a lot of people have given me this compliment before, and I understand that it comes from a good place, but they've gone, you're good enough to do Shakespeare. You're good enough to do the classics. Not knowing that I was trained as a classical actor, that I know I can do that work, but that I chose to take this other path. Even though I was told I would never have a career if I did queer or Chicana work. That I made, again, that choice along my journey of saying, you know what, there aren't that many of us. I do have some skills, and for the little life that I have, I would like to put my spirit and my body and my talents to be of service for this community and these communities that still aren't reflected on the main stages, on television, on films, you name it. And maybe it means, it's the same 50 people I'll play to every time in LA, but as it turns out, sometimes it's 300 and some people. And the faces change, and the faces stay the same, right? Ivan and Robin, and it's become that reciprocity that I feel with my público. That I was like, okay, so almost 15 years later, I've never regretted making that choice. That it has sustained my life as a human being. To make art that matters for those same people who have come back and said, your show saved my life. I came out to my parents after this. I brought my little sister, she's gay. I talked to so-and-so. And beyond the queer community, the mothers. Yo no sabía que mi hija era lesbiana, pero ahora sí lo entiendo todo. So it's, in that specificity, I have found the best of my audiences, and artist friends that, that I'm like aware of, that they're in the circuits. I'm like, and so I keep folks on radar, because of my schedule and I travel a lot of times I end up seeing other people's shows when I'm booked at the same conference. But I'm always aware of like who's out there because it is such a small community, right? And it's that wonderful tightrope that we walk with each other. You know, a community can own you and a community can disown you. So I always practice non-attachment with them. I'm like, this is what I have to offer. If it works for you, great. If not, come to the next show. You know, because my hope is that every show evolves and gives something different, even as it's tackling similar themes. You know.
Great. Well, I was going to say, let's let the audience jump in here, and then we'll wrap it up soon. Okay, go for the market.
And I hope this isn't too personal. I'm not trying to be up in achievement, but since this is so pertinent to your work, I wondered, is there a moment that you knew you were a Jota and a moment that you knew you were Xicana, and did they happen at the same time, or were they totally separate? Or
Yeah, for me, I grew up in San Antonio, so you grow up in your Chicanidad, even if that's not the name that you give it. I came into Chicana consciousness and the term itself because of the published literatures of Moraga and Saldúa, Castillo, Cisneros, because I was in college starting in 91. So luckily those books were already out. They weren't at my library, but I was able to find them.
you heard about them?
Yeah, I heard about it. It took women of color, right? Older Chicanas, mujeres, who were like, have you read so-and-so? And I'd read Plato's Republic 3 times, Chekhov, I did the classics and I did them well. But I had not read work that spoke to me, that spoke like me. And when I did, all of a sudden I had names and language and terms for my experiences. So it was this wonderful way in which I realized, oh, I've been living the Chicana experience, but this isn't the term that I have grown up with. I grew up in Texas, so one of the things about Texas is that one becomes very Texas identified, very Hispanic identified, and in 7th grade, literally, you were taught about the Mexicans. I still remember vividly my 7th grade history class, a room full of Chicanitos and Mexicanos learning about the Mexicans. The
Over
bad
there.
Mexicans, yes, the ones who invaded the Alamo, right? And it's deep because that is happening, it's commonplace in South, Arizona, and this way in which to remove us from our histories, our languages, and our stories is a way for us to not know ourselves and then to become something other than that is a benefit, for our comunidades. So the coming into consciousness as a Chicana happened first, and it really was something, it was something that I've never given up. And I say that because I have a lot of friends in the academy, and language in the academy runs rampant. I think there's a new term every week, right? And those identities matter. And no matter how many identities I may pick up along the way, the Chicana identity matters to me because it's connected to a history. We are in this room, we are able to be who we are because we're on the shoulders of civil rights activists, right? East LA rep, right? The history connected to Chicano theater. We can't take that for granted because it's not that long ago. I have a joke in one of my stand-up shows where I talk about, oh yeah, respect your elders. I'm like, unless they're white, because if they're in their 70s, I don't know what side they were on. I don't know if they wanted me on the bus, off the bus, or they wanted to run me over by the bus. And it's very true that it takes a long time, right? And so part of the mentoring, part of the conversations intergenerationally is recognizing what sacrifices have been made, what is required of us today, and what will be required of the generation to come. And if we can continue this intergenerational conversation, then it's a way to not necessarily recreate the wheel or repeat cycles, And that's sometimes what's missing is the intergenerational conversation. So because I grew up in Texas, and I grew up in a very repressed household, an extremely homophobic environment. I think I said the word queer once as a child when I was in 4th or 5th grade. I asked my mom, I was like, Mom, what does queer mean? She said, no digas esa palabra. Right, so I knew not to, I was like, okay. And then at some point I said the word gay lord. Esa palabra también. So all of a sudden words were being
Fast for translation.
Which word?
Gaylord.
She said in response to queer.
What did I say?
No digas esa
Oh,
palabra. No digas
yeah.
esa palabra.
Yeah.
Don't say this word.
Don't say that word.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, which I think has informed the kind of words I do say as an artist on stage, and so I grew up as a homophobic Hispanic kid, polar opposite of who I am today, which is going back to believing in process of consciousness, believing that we don't give up on each other.
Like hating gays as a kid?
Oh, absolutely. Not hating gays and fearing gays. It was the era of the 1980s, so you could get AIDS by sitting on a toilet, supposedly.
Rock Hudson and all that.
All of it. It was culture of fear, culture of oppression, and culture of hypocrisy, right? Because in the same household or cultura where we tell our young women, oh, make sure you stay virgins until you're married, but rampant rapes and molestation happen within our own familias. It's a culture of schizophrenia sometimes for young women in particular, and young men, because it happens with all kinds of children, right? That one grows up misinformed and ignorant, and I can say that about my younger self, and with a lot of compassion, because again, I look at gente and I was like, well, what created that person? What environment? And it took, again, those life experiences, right? It took people that I loved and respected coming out to me and saying, well, just so you know, I'm gay and all this, and it took me questioning everything and evolving, so that when I came into my my queerness, my lesbianism, well, for me it was like this process of like, oh, I must be bisexual because I had dated men, and then 2 years later I was like, I'm only chasing panocha, I guess I'm a
You need to translate.
Translate panocha.
Just Google it.
I'll get it later.
But it became this way in which, that's why I have a lot of compassion for folks who are in places that I go, okay, I was there. But to know what it took in life for me to evolve, for me to have enough life experience and contact with other cultures and communities and peoples to get here, I have to have optimism and faith as an artist that this is part of what we do with our work.
But the queerness came after your realization that you were Chicana?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it was, I would say it came afterwards, and then it was very clear because of the works that I had read. Thankfully, I had read Chicana lesbian works, that I didn't have this disassociation like other Latinas that I talked to about, oh, I thought queerness was a white thing, and so I didn't associate it culturally. For me, it was very much, again, because of those writers, oh, Chicana lesbian. Bam, I knew it. Once I was in it, I recognized it. Because of my Chicanismo, which was really fantastic, my Chicanismo gave me a certain warriorhood, in that from going from San Antonio to going to Dallas, where there was, the cultural temperament at that time, it was very gringo, and I was the only Chicana in my drama arts program, as an actor, maybe one of the few people of color, So what that gave me, that kind of warriorhood, that unapologetic stance, is that when I first fell in love with a woman, and I realized that, oh, I can fall in love with women, and then realized, no, the way I fall in love with women is so different from my experience with men, that there was no apology there either. I think I fell in love with a woman, and then maybe within a month or 2 months came out to my family because I was not going to be ashamed about it. And coming out to my family was critical because for me it was, even if my mother had rejected me, I knew this is who I was. But I'm grateful that my mother, who was highly religious and literally was holding her rosary as I had gathered my family in this little coming out session.
She knew it was coming out. Something's going down.
They're like, oh, Lena wants to have a talk. Because I'm the political one. And I still remember, I was telling this story just a couple of years ago, and my brother, who's now grown, was in it. He's like, oh, I remember that. The summer I came out, I was a late bloomer, so I was 22. And that means that my younger brothers were in middle school. And this is the age when they started to bandy the words about, around, like bitch, faggot, all these kinds of words. And it clicked. I said, they're connecting to words in a way that has no personal identification for them. Because that's what I did as middle school. I heard it, oh, he's a so-and-so, that's a dyke, da-da-da. And it really struck me. And so by this time, 22, like I've come into a lot of political consciousness, feminism, and I was like, okay, time to take the politics home. And it's always what I tell activists who I love and adore. I was like, and have you taken that home yet? Because you can do the activism on the streets, you can do it with your community, but until you practice it at home, that's a completely different challenge altogether. And so I gathered my family, and it was my young brothers, and I said, well, I was about to go the next day back to Dallas to school anyway. I was like, I'll see you all in Christmas, you can process. No, but I was like, no, but it was also this way in which I was not going to leave not like with a secret or anything. I said, I love you all. I said, I just want you to know that from now on, when you throw those words around, I said, first of all, that word, I use it in my show, but I try to use it in political ways, right, politically. I said, but when you're saying bitch, you're saying dyke, I said, I want you to keep in mind, as my brothers, that you're talking about your sister. I said, when you're saying queer, when you're saying fat, I said, you're talking about your sister. And they looked at me, wide-eyed. And I said, because I learned that I'm bisexual. I said, so that might mean that I might bring a girlfriend home one day, and I need you all to know this, and silence, and my mom's like, silence. And then humor in the family, which I always will appreciate the baby in the family, because we all have this sense of humor. It's all about timing. And he's like, so does this mean like, what, you're gonna like try to steal my girlfriend? And I looked at him and I was like, ay, mijo, they're not cute enough. Hey, so we're like going back, it's like humor. Then it's like one up each other. So they were laughing. And I see my mom, and my mom's like, Mom, I was like, man, at least like, do you have any questions? And to this day, I will always appreciate the fact that, with her rosary, she said, as long as you're happy, I love you. And that for me, that is not the experience of all QPOC. That is why when people are like, I don't understand why you don't just come out, there's will and grace and the L word now. Yeah, but there's not the J word, and there's not like, Guillermo y Graciela, which speaks to our cultura. I always turn it back on folks and say, if you were willing to lose everyone that you love today because you're going to reveal something that they may not understand, is that if you can really take that risk and feel it here, then you tell me again, why don't you just come out, Because it's the onus should go back on our society, right? And that each person has a right to figure it out, in their own way. I do believe that walking in your truth is important. I've never wanted fame or aspire to it, except for the reason that I was like, oh, it'd be so great if I was famous, because then I wouldn't have to come out anymore. Like everybody just know, like, Adelina, she's gay. Like Ellen never has to come out again, right? And I was like, wow, I just want one season where I can be like, Jota. People recognize me at the airport, they're like, it's Jota Mami. No questions asked, they just know. And for that, and then until we get to a society where, yeah, it truly doesn't matter, who you love. But we're not there yet. And so it came afterwards, but it was so like integrated that it wasn't
It's connected.
It was connected. It was absolutely connected. And then I started to have those moments of recognizing in my life where I had seen joteria, but they had
translate.
He's our translator. We had seen, I had seen them, but we were kept away because of that fear, or it was not talked about. Again, everything that is suppressed and that is like loathsome, and yet there was this really deep non-reflection sometimes happening, within the same household. So, yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you for the question. Daniel.
Hey, thanks. Can you talk a bit about the relationship between activism and being an artist, if you identify, and almost kind of the desire to tell your own story, or maybe even going for the story of your communities or your identities, and the sense of ego and also graciousness in your work?
I think most people in this room gravitated to activism, what I call activism with the capital A, in that in my 20s, especially my early 20s, and throughout that decade, I did the organizing, depending on my local community, would work on political campaigns and got involved in grassroots organizations. I also intuited early on, and then had the fortune to know and to work with artists who are using art in activist ways, which means that I was influenced early on by the fact that our art can change the world, right? Like one of the core values of it, how you interact with your community. And so for a long time, I was doing both, the capital A activism and trying to do art. And fortunately, it was the mentorship with Cherie, and this was in my late 20s, where she first gave me that clarity of understanding, where she sat me down and she's like, your art, capital A, because of what you do and how we do it, is activism. So you can give yourself the freedom and the liberty to devote yourself 110% to the art, which sometimes we feel very guilty about, because we feel like, but if I'm not out there doing the grassroots door-to-door campaigning, which I still do, right? It depends on what the campaign is, and sometimes you have to take to the streets. You have to be part of the marches. But making that decision at 29, that I was not going to apologize anymore for doing the artistry at 100%. I began to understand that because of what the themes I work with and how I say it, my job, if I was going to have any kind of effect in my communities, meant that I had to work on the craft. Because politics are one thing, and a work may have good politics, but if it's quote-unquote bad art, it's not going to do anything but bore the audience. It's going to come off righteous. It can turn people off, and there's room for that, right? Performance art can kind of do that in interesting ways. So I'm saying all that with this kind of understanding that I wanted to be an artist who made really good work with really important politics to me, to my family, to my communities. And sometimes I don't even agree with all the politics, so I'm trying to get in there by virtue of the art process, so that the art is entertaining enough and provokes enough that people walk away first moved emotionally and intellectually. Because I really, really believe that there was a reason our Mexica ancestors said the heart was our seat of reason and our place of real intellect. And as an artist, this is a place that I have to work from. So they're not disconnected. I don't have that Western division of the mind. So I was like, no. This if I feel something here, it's going to provoke thought. And it's this continuous like feeding, right? This circle of, wow, I've been thinking these politics, but put into practice, this is the heart lessons that I learned. And going all connected to that sense of consciousness, and in our communities, partly where we fail each other is, what's not talked about is that we have extremely talented and intelligent people in our community, but there's also a difference between brainy intelligence and emotional intelligence. And if we learned as a society, which is why I think teatro is one of the last platforms for us really in a community, where we can develop emotional intelligence. I think that's something to strive for as culturas, because it's the emotional intelligence that makes a difference of how we interact with each other. And it's the emotional intelligence that really starts to change familias, relationships, communities, policies. And you can talk people all the smart politics, but if they disagree, they're going to continue to disagree and come at you. And I was just having dinner with a friend, and we were talking about this, and I was like, I honestly believe that those hardcore people who like hate me for who I am. Like I had someone when I was on MySpace. Ooh, back in the day.
Translation, please.
MySpace used to exist before Facebook, and no, but and that's deep because there's like class politics around why that went down. But that's another speech. I had someone who's like, why does all your work have to be gay? Why can't you make jokes about a blender? And I usually don't respond. Like blenders. I see this like dude trying to be funny, and I hardly ever respond. But this one time I was like, blenders aren't killed for who they are. They can, you're right. Like that's the truth of it. Like blenders. Please, like, don't be a tonto, and then I unfriended him or whatever.
Unspaced.
Get out of my space. I don't remember what it was back then, but that's connected to the heart of the activism in my work, is that that I know that sometimes I don't believe that. You know, I think each of us has voice. Each of us is an artist. Each of us has one great story. Each of us has many great stories if we cultivate the practice. And what you learn as you keep working is, as an artist, that everything is a composite. Like the only reason I can generate work is because it's not all based on my life. Like it's life meets imagination, meets chisme, meets this idea, you know, and it's this wonderful like hodgepodge of ideas that percolate, you know, and so it's just a way to kind of make a living through the art, and it's this dance back and forth. Like the art is saying, okay, I want to go in this direction, and a lot of times I'm letting the art take me there. And then I'm going, wow, like that came out of me, why? Like I'll do a lot of reflection. Like I'm my worst critic. That's why I don't worry about people critiquing me. Because I'll go afterwards, like I'll look at my shows and I was like, no, that's all. And I'm like talking about my work like it's, you know, and not critic, like hating on it, like critical, like, oh, I missed this point. Oh, this could have been sharper, this could have been, and for me it's like, okay, in the next show, you know, the next piece. Because it's not fair to always like catch an artist and see one show and go like, oh, I know what they do. Unless it's an artist who's repeating themselves, which sometimes happens, and you're like, oh yeah, I saw that show 10 years ago and it was the same, you know, kind of the same thing. Like, look at the breadth of work, and if they're evolving, I think that's exciting. Those are the artists that I look for, that are like, they're like, every 5 years, they're going in a direction that I would have never imagined.
So you like that? Because I know, like, we have our friend Luis Alfaro, right? Mm-hmm. And people have this huge complaint. I got into a fight with somebody in Arizona once, or in Baltimore. No, Baltimore. She's from Arizona. From Baltimore. Pero, you know, she was so upset, you know, because his play had premiered over here, and then it came over here, and he changed it, and then it went over there, and he changed it. And I'm like, but his art, you know, it's like this, you know, semilla, right? And he tends it, and then he prunes it, and then it looks a little different, and I love that. And then there's this, I know this other playwright, it's like, no, ya acabé, ya, my play is finished. And I respect that too. I know that I gravitate towards the artist that is constantly así, ¿verdad? Con la masa. Pero I also understand, you know, it's time to make the tamal and it's finished. You know, and I get them both, but I hate it. I hate that, you know, that he was criticized for changing his play, and, you know, he changes, and also it went to a different community. So, I mean, does your work?
I completely am of the same strand, because Los Xicona are finally going to get published this year. I have stayed away from publishing because I change my work all the time, because I feel like I see new things in it. Like, I won't completely, like, Mastering Sex and Tortillas has become this little, like, it has a little cultish following sometimes that I laugh about. I was like, oh, these tortilleras, and but even that show has gone through manifestations, and obviously I'm not going to change the basic premise, which is there's a high femme profe and there's a bucha FBI undercover detective, right?
Why change it?
Right, they stay, but the language can change the context of it, and I tinker all the time, and so I laugh because the only reason in Los Xiconas it's getting published, there's a note that says, just be aware that this performance may change in life, because there's also something to be said about staying true to the moment. Like, anytime you get a chance to come back to your work, it's an opportunity to improve upon it. And I'm of the mind that an artist should always have the right to improve on their work or see something. And then there's also a point where I know as an artist, I'm done with this piece, and maybe I'll perform it because it pays the bills and someone wants to see it, but I'm not going to mess with it anymore, because if I'm, let's say, in a different place and I want to explore completely different material, that to me is like, oh, time to create a new show. So it's also I do both. Like, I'm very clear, like, no, I challenge myself with this here, now I'm going to move on and do something else. That show that Marcos came to see when I did with Dilo this June at the Gay and Lesbian Center, that came about because I had just finished La Xicona series, and I had exhausted myself as a solo artist and felt like if I couldn't do something novel with the form or didn't have something interesting to say, it was time to step away. And I thought, perfect, then I'll write a 2-person show, and what better person to perform it with than one of my best friends, a collaborator that I've worked with, and it's probably one of the best experiences I've ever had, because it just let me go into completely new terrain as an artist. Now I have ideas for a solo show, right? So I'm also conscious of why working in different genres helps us, and you know, that idea of like staying creative. I think sometimes, you know, it's also when I'm tinkering, I'm like, am I tinkering with this because tengo ansias to create something new, or is it because it still needs, you know, development? And I love tinkering. I don't see how people stop. Like, if I were a painter, my work at a museum, I'd probably like sneak in paintbrushes. You know, and I'd probably get arrested for vandalizing my own work. I'd be like, no. I noticed that hue of blue was missing, because why not? You know, when I'm dead, pues yeah, everything's gonna be done. It's gonna be done. You're gonna get little memos from the other side. By the way. You know, so I also, you know, I tend to respect how artists work, and there is no one way how an artist works, and each artist will find the methodology to create and to be whole. So this idea of staying healthy as an artist means being true to yourself, You know, like, what works for you? Because sometimes when I'm working with young folks, I'm like, hey, this is what I do, but this isn't what I was doing 5 years ago. If I'm changing, and so I just try to stay aware. Every December for me is super reflective time, and I take the year in stock, and I was like, okay, what did I accomplish? Where do I want to go? What are my aspirations? Am I working in a way that serves me now? Because sometimes, you know, you're holding the 8-hour job and then trying to make art. You know, so I've been in that place. Sometimes you've got the grant and you've got 3 months, and if you don't know how to put the discipline and the structure, those 3 months can just disappear. So I think it's being really present and aware with yourself about what you need to cultivate work. And if you need the peer group, get your peer group. You know, I have a set of friends, it just takes 2 or 3 people. Your comadres, your compadres would be like, every Monday. Perfect.
Or Wednesdays, office hours.
Or Wednesdays, office hours, exactly.
Just a little
We
bit.
think we're writers.
Exactly. But, yeah. I don't like when people are mean to other artists.
Yeah.
Don't be, like, why be mean?
Yeah.
Don't be haters. But you know why people are mean to artists sometimes? Because most people are frustrated artists. You know, if we were allowed, all of us, to be artists, go to a kindergarten class, and don't tell me that everyone in that room has some artistic, you know, energy buzzing around. Maybe they're the writer, the painter, the quiet. Those children are artists. We're born creative, and then society, you know, convinces us otherwise. And so sometimes I think you'll encounter people who come at you and they're just mad. They're mad that they didn't have the bravery to do the art, you know. And it's not, don't romanticize it. We know it's hard, and you know, you do it because you love it, and it's a passion, and it's if you did nothing else, I mean, I know for myself I could not do anything else. I laugh because when the economy goes bad, I was like, get a job. I was like, oh my God, what am I qualified to do? I just know how to make art. You know, but that being said, when the economy did crash, and I had some friends who took that safe route, and they lost their 401ks, and they had given up like their writing and all this. And 1 year, like, I had an extra $5,000 in the bank. Like, I was richer than my corporate friends for 1 year. Nonetheless, I was like, mira nomás, ya ves? I still have my art. So they get mad, and that's okay. Lead them to the art. Everyone can be an artist, really. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Adelina.
Thank you.
A shout out to Cindy Marie Jenkins. Beyond the Blurb, and thank you all for being here, present at East LA Rep, and this has been Office Hours by Appointment. Thank you very much.